Hello and welcome to Policy and Politics with me, Tarun Nangia. Well, today we're going to discuss some trivia. Do you know way back in 1947, when India attained independence, there was a sinister plan to have three countries come out instead of two, which is India, Pakistan, and a third country, which would be a collection of small princely states brought in together. Now, this factoid would shock you. Why would this shock you? Because we were told and taught all along that there was a plan for unified India, then there was a plan hatched, and then Pakistan came into being. It was a part of the great game, so on and so forth. But did we all know that there was a plan for a third country? But if you want to know more about this, I would recommend you this book called Princestan. As you can see this book, Princestan. This book is authored by Sandeep Bamzai. As we all know, he's a veteran editor and an author of 5 books. And we are thankful for him for making time today and joining us. Mr. Bamzai, thank you so much for joining us for today's show. And
I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be here, Tarun. Thanks for having me here.
And congratulations to you on your book, which I'm sure will be very well received by not only the history buffs, but a lot of people who want to know why a third country. So let that be my first question. What brought you to writing this book, and how these facts reveal itself to you?
Okay, so 15 years ago when I was writing my last book, which is essentially the story of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir's controversial accession to India. The fact that it happened after August 15, it happened on October 26. The entire accession was mired in controversy. And while writing that and immersing myself in all the documents and the missives and the confidential aid memos, etc., I found some sort of a storyline emerging on how the princes had conducted themselves in the run-up to independence. Not just the Maharaja of Kashmir, but a whole host of princes. The Maharaja of Travancore, for instance, the Nawab of Bhopal, Hamidullah Khan, for instance, the Nizam of Hyderabad, the Nawab of Junagadh, and a wide variety of princes on one side who were attempting to sabotage the entire independence plan, as it were, and people like Maharaja of Bikaner and people like Maharaja of Patiala, who were convinced that a unified India under the Indian National Congress was the only way to go, and how they battled for this same unified India. Now, mind you, history, as I have now come to know, reveals that there was a chamber of princes created by the British, and it was called the bastard child of the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms. The chamber of princes actually had a chancellor. In this case, the last chancellor of the Chamber of Princes, also called Narendra Mandal, and with a massive chamber in the parliament as we know it now, was Hamidullah Khan, the Nawab of Bhopal. And all 565 princes, big, small, duck-horns, were all more or less present in this Chamber of Princes. So it gave these princes enormous heft when they were to have a dialogue with the Congress party on the future, on how they would be represented in the Constituent Assembly. And let's understand, the British, when they were decolonizing India, were handing over 18 provinces. The princely states were asked to sign standstill agreements in favor of either of the two dominions, in this case, Pakistan and India. The partition of India, I just want to complete this, the partition of India was actually the partition of two states. The partition of India was not the partition of India as we know it. The partition was the partition of Punjab, east and west, the partition of Bengal, east and west. Before that, the British Empire had already undergone a partition 10 years earlier, when Burma was partitioned out of the British Empire and created as a separate entity. That was in 1937. So Nehru, Patel, Mountbatten, and several other people like B.P. Menon realized that you could not have an India just of those 18 provinces. You had to have the whole, which in this case is the 565 princes. And in a conversation which I've revealed in the book, between Mountbatten and Sardar Patel, Patel tells Mountbatten, are you giving me the whole basket of apples? In this case, he's referring to the 565 apples. So Mountbatten counter questions him and says, do you want them all or can I keep one or two? In a jocular way. Patel says, I want all 565 apples. So that's the genesis of this book and the papers, etc. Then as I dug deeper, as I immersed myself deeper in research.
Now, I would like to explore two thoughts with you. First, this conversation with Patel, I'm sure, is very interesting, where Sardar Patel says, as you mentioned, that I want the whole basket of apples, which shows how tough, hard as nails person he was. He wanted the whole India united. But I want to share and want to know from you, you said about the Maharaja of Travancore. Was he also a part of the plan not to, in a sense, align with India?
So the plan is called actually Plan Balkan. It deals with the Balkanization of India. It is, the seed of this is planted by Winston Churchill. Remember that Winston Churchill is still in power. Churchill plans this along with Lord Wavell and the head of the British political department, Sir Conrad Corfield, and brings Jinnah on board. And through Jinnah brings all the Muslim princes on board. Essentially, Ramchandra Kak represents the Maharaja of Kashmir, who wants to stay independent. Nawab of Bhopal is promised the Governor Generalship of Pakistan by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. So he's on board. Travancore, represented not necessarily by the Maharaja at all times, but by his Prime Minister, Sir C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer, plans a sabotage, which is, I mean, if I was to reveal it now, you would think, imagine the sheer size and scale of the sabotage. So he does a deal. They have monazite sands, which is basically thorium, which is part of the nuclear business. These monazite sands are then, a deal is done where a British company or the British government will pick up those thorium, that thorium, and in return for that thorium, Travancore will be granted independence.
It is such a big thing. Yes. You mean to say way back 60 years ago, Travancore wanted actually to be independent, not Travancore, but at least the rulers that time. They wanted.
Yes, the ruler of Travancore, along with his Prime Minister, Sir C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer, was always batting on the front foot and trying to do this deal with the British. The deal was more or less consummated, but it is my grandfather, who was the special correspondent of the Blitz, who broke the story in the Blitz. And before he broke the story, he handed over the papers that he had to Jawaharlal Nehru. And Nehru, at a famous Congress session, stood up and waved those papers and said, look at what people like Travancore are doing. Look at how they're trying to sabotage the process. Look at how they are trying to scupper the entire independence / freedom movement. So this is the level of intrigue and chickenry that existed amongst the princes. I told you about the Nawab of Bhopal. He was trying to get the Governor Generalship of Pakistan. So each and every individual was doing whatever he could to stay out of the ambit of the Indian National Congress and the independent India as we know it now.
No, I have with me an extract from your book. This is page number 99 from the Jinnah Churchill Bhopal Travancore maneuvers. Mm-hmm. And it speaks about a very interesting line. By the early 1940s, the cozy special relationship between the British Crown and the Indian princes had become such a fact of political life in both Delhi and Whitehall that people like Leo Emery, Secretary of State in Winston Churchill's wartime coalition government, could speak of it as it always existed. Now, in about 1 minute, could you explore, do you think all the princes had been co-opted by the British and they were as British as the Britishers? So there existed a different India at that plane?
Well, at one level, yes, because these princely states were outside the ambit of the provinces. And they led lives which were unimaginable. They were relatively autonomous, but they took their diktats from Sir Conrad Corfield through the British resident who was parked in each and every province, in each and every princely state. So Conrad Corfield had a Garrett-like grip on all these princely states, big and small, because he had the British resident. Now, you have to go back a bit in time and go to the mutiny of 1857, which startled the British for the sheer response and the sheer magnitude of the revolt that took place against the British Raj. That is where the seeding of what we have now come to know takes place immediately after the revolt of 1857. The so-called Sepoy Mutiny, actually the princes, several of them, were hand in glove. Several of them, and I don't want to name them, several of them are named in my book, were actually co-opted by the British. And covenants were signed by the British. So it's a mix of treaties. It's a mix of paramountcy, a law that was created. It's a mix of covenants that were signed between several of the smaller princes and the British Empire. And all these people believed that they were free, that even when India became independent on the 15th of August, they would continue to lead their lives of debauchery, and they would continue to park their own people, their own subjects in serfdom and penury. This is the attitude. This is the mindset. And on July 25th, 1947, it is Mountbatten who calls the bulk of the princes and gives them a tongue lashing of the kind that you cannot imagine. And this breaks the back of the princes, including Hamidullah Khan, the Nawab of Bhopal, who's the chief saboteur. And he says that we have been betrayed. See, let's understand. March 23rd, Mountbatten is sent to India by Clement Attlee, who is now the head of the Labour government. Churchill has lost the election. Mountbatten came in 1921-22 as the aide-de-camp to King Edward VII. So a lot of these princes, their fathers, their sons, their families had interfaced with Lord Mountbatten in 1921-22. So they thought that he's the great-grandson of Queen Victoria. He's part of British royalty. Why will he stab us in the back? He will allow us freedom. This is the greatest misconception with which the bulk of the princes went to that meeting. And he came in his full regalia on that July 25th meeting, and he just fulminated against them, saying that as of today, you have only one option. There is no treaty, there is no paramountcy, there is no covenant, nothing stands. On August 15 and before that, you have to sign a standstill agreement in favor of either Pakistan or India.
We will go to page number 98 of the book, again from the chapter Churchill-Bhopal Travancore maneuvers. And this paragraph, which is on the page 98, says Sardar Patel didn't brook much interference in his work at integrating the princely states. Most believed he was ruthless, and though the idea of an integrated India emanated from Nehru, who wanted the princes and their fiefdoms dismantled, it was Sardar who stored the steel, resolve, and spine after independence. But it isn't as if Nehru's took a back seat after 15th August 1947 in this regard. Mr. Bamzai, could you explore on the role of Sardar Patel in a minute and why his role mattered in integrating the princely states?
Tarun, let's understand the way I have approached the subject is essentially through the prism of the three main dramatis personae, or in this case protagonists, which is Nehru, Patel, and Mountbatten. And I say this for a reason, because in many ways it's a relay race. It is Nehru who starts this, hands the baton over to Patel, and then Nehru hands over the baton to Mountbatten, and Mountbatten then hands over the baton to Patel. So it's a relay race. Now, to come back to your specific question on this paragraph, there is a large section of the princes, Tarun, who actually goes to Patel and says, please let us deal with you. We don't want to deal with Nehru. Nehru doesn't listen to us. Nehru doesn't give us the time of the day. He just blasts us the moment he sees us. We believe you are a more reasonable man. And this is despite what I have written. He was ruthless. He had this steely resolve. And mind you, he's called the Iron Man of India. So there is a reason for that.
But he could negotiate.
But he would negotiate. Nehru would outrightly reject any move or maneuver that was coming from the princes.
You very interestingly pointing out where Nehru was dismissive uh, Sardar Patel had the tact to engage them into a conversation and hold out and hand out
Yes,
sweebies and
yes,
bargains.
yes.
And I might want to read out a paragraph from your
I'll
book.
just
This
add
is page number 100.
I just want to add one thing which tells you the difference in the characteristics of these two men, because both are very tall men as far as our freedom movement is concerned. When Sheikh Abdullah insists and is persistent and he wants Maharaja Hari Singh out of his hair, although Maharaja Hari Singh has now moved to Jammu, it is Nehru who tells Patel that you deal with this. And it is Patel who convinces Hari Singh to move to Bombay and never return to Kashmir. And Maharani Tara Devi, his wife, is sent off to Dehradun. So people don't know this, people don't remember this, but Hari Singh is actually taken out of the equation of Jammu and Kashmir, and he lived his life in Bombay, and he died in Bombay, whereas Maharani Tara Devi moved out and lived in Dehradun. So both of them, it is Patel who convinces them. It is Patel who, at the behest of Nehru, appoints first Karan Singh as regent, and then, of course, he is appointed Sadr-e-Riyasat once the prime ministership goes to Sheikh Abdullah. So,
Okay.
again, these are very important nuances in this relationship between Nehru and Patel. And once again, to explain the larger business of this baton being passed over in various cases, this is another example of the same.
Now, Central India, as far as we know, is the heart of India. Central provinces were one of the largest provinces in the British India. 112 page from your book talks about how in March 1949, VP Menon arrived in Bhopal to finalize the merger agreement. According to this, Hamidullah Khan was to receive a privy purse of rupees 11 lakh annually. The die was cast. The princely state of Bhopal was banished forever to the annals of history. Bhopal was merged with Madhya Bharat state of India on 30th April 1949. Now, as far as we understand from your book, it was very critical to have Bhopal on our side. How was this done?
Again, it is the construct of this is very simple. It is Menon who is sent by Sardar Sahab to Bhopal to convince the Nawab. Well, actually, the convincing part is over because Hamidullah Khan is already a broken man. What happened with Mountbatten on July 25th has disheartened him completely. He has resigned as the Chancellor of the Chamber of Princes. Jinnah too, by that time, has double-crossed him and is no longer offering him the job of Governor Generalship of Pakistan. So he is quite a broken and disheartened person. And this is actually low-hanging fruit for VP Menon, who goes and grabs. And please understand, a Bhopal right in the middle of India, like an East Pakistan, a Central Pakistan, a Hyderabad below that, more or less contiguous to Madhya Pradesh, which is Bhopal. Again, a South Pakistan. So the tall leaders who architected independence, particularly Nehru and Patel, could never ever accept such a position from these princes, because their idea of India was one India, unified from top to bottom. And that is why Kashmir was important, Travancore was important, Bhopal was important, Junagadh was important strategically because it was right next to Pakistan. And mind you, Junagadh actually had a referendum, which Kashmir never had, but Junagadh had a referendum. And Junagadh actually voted 97% in favor of India. And mind you again, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's father was the Prime Minister of Junagadh. And he too ran away to Pakistan at that point in time when the referendum confirmed that the people of Junagadh wanted to be part of it.
Now, moving ahead, in your chapter titled How Sardar Cut His Teeth, you have verbatim put out conversations between Patel and Nehru. Nehru wrote to Patel on February the 3rd, 48, I have been greatly distressed by the persistence of whispers and rumors about you and me. We must put an end to this mischief. There is another anecdote about Patel replying to Nehru on 3rd August 1947. This is earlier, My services will be at your disposal. I hope for the rest of my life, you will have unquestioned loyalty and devotion from me in the cause for which no man in India has sacrificed as much as you have done. Our combination is unbreakable, and therein lies our strength. Do you think, despite all the murmurs of them talking about good relations between them, there was a clear difference in working style, and these were two separate individuals? So it is not as if you need to have great relations. Both can bring their own skill sets to the table.
Oh, without a doubt, Tarun, these were two battle-hardened men, but who thought differently. Nehru was inclined more towards Fabian socialism. He was completely anti-monarchical. All his moves from the time he returned to India, and most notably in 1923, when he was incarcerated in the princely state of Naba, his thought process, mindset was completely in sync with being anti-British, anti-princes. Patel was a different sort of individual. Patel was for most part somebody who followed Mahatma Gandhi, given the fact that he was also a Gujarati from the same, he had the same background. Both were barristers at law. Both went to England and studied. They were both Anglophiles. But Patel's thinking of a unified India obviously is completely in sync with Nehru. And this is brought out by one or two things. One, which I will reveal in my next book, but I will reveal it in this conversation that I'm having with you. In 17 York Road, which was the Prime Minister's house in 1947, October 26, Teen Murti was the residence of the Commander-in-Chief of the British Army, and Sir Claude Auchinleck used to stay there. So 17 York Road is where the cabinet was meeting. October 26 is the date. VP Menon arrives from Jammu along with Sam Manekshaw and a couple of others. And the first thing he does when he enters is that the bastard has signed it. He waves the instrument of accession and says, the bastard has signed it. Sheikh Abdullah is sitting in an anteroom, and Sheikh Abdullah sends a note to Jawaharlal Nehru, who is the Prime Minister, saying, this is the moment. We need to fly the Indian Army to save Kashmir. Nehru vacillates. And it is Patel who tells Nehru, Jawahar, Kashmir chahiye ki nahi chahiye? Nehru continues to vacillate. Sardar Baldev Singh, who is the defense minister, is also present. He also pitches in, but Sardar again and again, twice or thrice, tells him, Jawahar, Kashmir chahiye ki nahi chahiye? And finally, Nehru says, okay, and the Sikh regiment is flown to Kashmir to save Kashmir in Dakotas. Sheikh Abdullah, who is sitting in the anteroom, is one of the first people to be on those Dakotas when they land to save Kashmir.
Now,
so again, this is Sardar Patel. Now I'll give you another example, again, which shows the interplay that takes place between the two. And I'll show you a picture, which I think will speak more eloquently than I can. The picture is of, you can see Pandit Ji, Jawaharlal Nehru, you can see Sardar Patel sitting here, and you can see my father sitting at their feet. So the story is that my father, because my grandfather was so besotted by Jawaharlal Nehru, named my father Jawaharlal. And the boy would be playing, he was 11 or 12 years old, and the boy would be playing in the garden because my grandfather, as OSD to Panditji, used to live in the outhouse in the same 17 York Road, in the Prime Minister's residence. So this boy was pottering in the garden when Panditji comes out and says, Jawahar, kya kar rahe ho? So he says, main to khel raha hu. Are chalo chalo, Sardar Sahab ki ek takreer hai, unne mujhe bulaya hai. So Nehru takes my father to this takreer, where Sardar Sahab is to speak. But Sardar Sahab says, Arey, Pandit ji, aap aa gaye, aap pehle boliye, main aapke baad bolunga. So there is, Nehru was short-tempered. Patel, it is said, was an able negotiator. He would listen, and then he was firm. He had the steely resolve. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. But Patel, you could still have a conversation with Patel from what I have gathered. You could not have a conversation with him.
Very beautifully explored by you. So in today's episode, we have explored, as they say, anecdotes and a satellite view of what Princestan was. We also delved into the kind of relationship Sardar Patel and Jawaharlal Nehru had. We would also delve into the kind of expectations the princely states, the rulers had. And but that's not the end of it. Very soon we're going to do a microscopic view of the book, wherein we'll pick up interesting anecdotes, bits, and explore on them, especially related to Central India and other issues, which I'm sure my viewers would find very interesting. But that's it for today. I would like to thank Mr. Bamzai for taking out time and joining us on Policy and Politics. And of course, to know more, you all have to go and buy this book. As you can see, it's Princestan, authored by Sandeep Bamzai. You can order it on Amazon or find it in a bookstore near you. Thank you so much.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.